Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It sounds like we're having some good conversations already, and I'm so happy to hear that. And that's the spirit of what we are coming together to do today. So, my name is Stacy Smallwood. I'm the chair of the One Borough Commission, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our second annual Securing Statesboro. We are so thankful for each of you for being here, for contributing of your time, your ideas, and your experiences as we explore how we can make Statesboro a safer, healthier place in which to live, work, pray, and play. And so with that, I'm going to do some general introductions, and then we're going to get into the heart of what we have come together to do this morning. First of all, I would like to take a moment to recognize the people who have helped to make this happen, the folks without whom we would not be here today. And so the first folks I would like to recognize are the members of the Violence Prevention Task Force of the One Borough Commission. So VPTF members, if you'll please stand, wave your hand. Thank you all so much for what you have done to contribute to this forum. I also want to take a moment to recognize the members of the One Borough Commission. Some of them are also part of the Violence Prevention Task Force. So One Borough, if you would stand, wave your hand so that you can be recognized. And some of them are also standing outside. There were the lovely people who were helping to direct folks to make sure that we were all able to find this space. I also want to take a moment to recognize our city leaders. So we have our city police chief, Chief Broadhead. And you'll hear from our mayor in just a moment. Do we have any other city leaders in the room? I just want to make sure, because we want to make sure that we recognize you. All right, we're good. So at this point, it is my pleasure to welcome to this space the mayor of Statesboro. He's going to come and give us our greetings as well as the charge for today. So it is my honor to introduce the Honorable Mayor, Jonathan McCollar.
Good morning. How y'all doing? All right, good deal. It's always a good morning when we all can come together. And I think that this is a very important topic today. And in the discussion of the things that's transpiring today, those of us that's on staff here and those of us that's a part of the One Borough Commission and our Youth Commission, we have a busy day today because we've got this event, and then following this event, we have our youth event. But the reason why we thought it was important for both of these things to happen today is because you can't do one without the other. If you think solving crime starts at the police department, you're wrong. And that's what we have to get to in this country. For the past 60 years, we've dumped billions of dollars into law enforcement. We've incarcerated 2 million people, and our communities are still not safe, right? And so after 60 years, we have to think about this differently, don't we? Okay, because for me, after 6 decades of committing failed policy, I think that's long enough for us to say we have to address this in a different way. The way you cut crime is by reducing the environment in which crime can be committed in. And so that means when you look at the data tells us it's not necessarily because you're black, white, Hispanic, or Asian that crime occurs. Crime occurs because you've got a group of people that's been disenfranchised socially, politically, and or economically. That's where the data is. If you are in Montana, then it's going to be one group of people. If you're in Texas, it's going to be another group of people. If you are in Georgia, it's going to be another group of people. That's what the data tells us. And so it was fitting for the Violence Prevention Task Force to fall under One Borough because the goal of One Borough is to break down the barriers that separates us. And the one thing that we all have in common, especially in this conversation, is the fact that we all agree that we want to have a safe community to live in, correct? And so the charge that we have today is simple. We must take ownership of the safety of our communities. And the key step to understanding how we take ownership in that is being able to recognize that we are all a part of the same community. We are all one borough. And as we work towards embracing that understanding, that's how we begin to also decrease the footprint that crime can occur in. And just so that you guys understand, when I came into office, one of the biggest issue that I said was facing our community was poverty. When I came into office, more than half of the people that live inside the city of Statesboro were living in poverty. 5 years later, that rate has been cut from above 50% down to 42%. When we talk about neighborhood revitalization, that is also how you decrease the footprint of crime. So when we're going in and we're talking about repairing homes, we're building out infrastructure, we're cleaning up our neighborhoods, and I'm sorry, Amanda's not here today, but she's doing a wonderful job with the Keep Statesboro Bulloch, beautiful organization, arm of the city. All of these things, revitalizing parks, making sure neighborhoods don't feel like they've been left behind, like they have been in the past. That's what we want to do. We want to show every inch of the city. We want to share that every individual, every single neighborhood in this community, it all matters. And that's how we begin to cut crime. And just so that you know, we're here because we recognize crime is important and we want to keep our neighborhoods safe. But over the past 5 to 6 years, crime has actually been decreasing in the city of Statesboro. Let me say that again. Crime has actually been decreasing. That's what the data tells us. What's shocking to people is this: the level of transparency that the city has. When our police department says, can you help us find this individual? When we share that one of our members in our community have been hurt or their life has been taken, we share all of this information because we recognize that it's all of our responsibility to keep our community safe. Second, if we're really going to put a dent in crime, we have to start investing into our youth. We have to, because when you look at the crime, breaking into cars, stealing items out of cars, stealing guns out of cars, these are young people doing these crimes. And if we can put a dent in that, just imagine how much safer our community becomes. And one thing I want to be extremely transparent about, my transparency comes with the understanding that our community has failed when it comes to investing into our young people. For the first time in the city history, we've made the largest investment into young people by launching our Village Builders initiative. An initiative that's working to address getting these young kids away from these gangs, getting them involved in workforce development, and providing them with proper mentorship so that we can deter the behavior. Now, I wish I could tell you that when we finish up today, there's going to be a magic wand that's created that we're going to be able to wave and all of the crime within this community is going to disappear. That's not going to be the scenario. But what I can tell you is this, is that if we're working together and getting rid of barriers that separate us, we will have a better community and a safer community. And that only happens when we recognize that securing Statesboro is all of our responsibility. And all of us must do our part. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor McCollar, for giving us our charge and setting up the purpose of why we are here today. So I want to take this opportunity to share with you the format of how we're going to engage in this conversation. And I emphasize the word conversation because this is not designed to be an event where we just come up here and we speak at you. This is designed to be an event where we are in dialogue about what we can do to actually make Statesboro safer, right? We want to have a conversation about what kind of violence is taking place, and also to kind of just emphasize why we are using this theme of beyond the numbers. We are doing this because we recognize that crime is important, and we have data to describe the different types of crime that is taking place in our community. But we also understand that violence takes on many different forms. It is not always just about the things that are arrestable offenses. It's also about the things that people don't ever report. It's about the things that we kind of sweep under the rug. And so we want to have a larger dialogue about what's happening around violence in our community so that we can make it safer in and outside of the statistics we're able to refer to, right? And so that is why we have used the theme of Beyond the Numbers. And that also means that we need each of you to be part of this conversation. So the way that we're going to move through this event today is we are actually going to start with some small group dialogues. We're going to have everyone, we're going to actually move into the room that's across the way, and we're going to have everyone in small groups, and we have a certain number of questions that we want each of you to respond to. So when you get into your groups, Demetrius is actually passing out the questions that you're going to be using, and I'm going to go over the front part in terms of the rules of how we're going to have this conversation in just a moment. But we've been to enough forums where it's just somebody as a talking head that's been up front, just sharing information, which is also vital. It's important. We're going to have some amazing people to share some information with us in the second half of our event. But we want to begin by hearing from you and getting your perspective, your ideas, your experiences, because that's going to help make for a richer tapestry where we can really figure out creative and innovative ways to reduce and prevent violence in our community. So with that, let me just give a little bit of information about how these groups are going to work. We're going to break up. We've got little circles of 5 that are set up in the other room. And so once you get your numbers and we figure out your groups, we're going to take you over to the other room. And what we want to make sure of is that we don't want any one person to dominate the conversation. So if you look at the front part of this, we have what we consider some rules of engagement, so to speak. So this is the tone that we want to set for the small groups. And then we'll come back and we'll hear from our amazing speakers, and then we'll have some debriefing. But each of you is going to participate in a small group dialogue. And so we ask that you agree to these rules so that we create a safe space where everyone can share their thoughts and feelings. So first, we ask that you will listen and be considerate of and attentive to the person who is speaking. Right? The listening is just as important as the sharing. And so not interrupting the person who's speaking. The second piece to this is that we want you to speak from your own experiences, feelings, and beliefs. We don't want you to criticize or disagree with others' thoughts, but share your own when it is your turn to speak. Also, because we are talking about some sensitive topics that are very charged, we also understand that there sometimes may be some anger that may come up, but try to express it in such a way that it does not hurt or antagonize the others within your group. Now, if there is time for follow-up questions or open listening, we ask that you will also not speak or ask questions that are critical or manipulative or judgmental, but ask questions that will help you to better understand the other person. And then finally, because we are talking about issues related to violence, and we may be speaking from our own experiences sometimes, we ask that you will observe confidentiality regarding what each person says and only repeat to others what someone says if you have their permission to do so. We want the ideas to go out from this space, but we don't want people's personal business to go out from this space. So what we are asking is that you will abide by these rules as you move into your small group dialogues, and we want all of you to participate. You may have a member of the Violence Prevention Task Force who will sit in on one of your groups and just take notes. That's because we just want to make sure that we're getting the ideas and then bringing them back into this space so that when we have our large group debriefing at the end, we'll be able to engage and you'll be able to hear what happened in all of the different groups. So we hope that, we ask that you understand these guidelines to help us have a productive and fruitful conversation. All right, welcome back, everyone. I hope that you all had some really deep and interesting and valuable conversations in your small groups. And so now we are going to get the perspectives about violence in our community from three amazing individuals. And so I will go ahead and mention each of them. I'll go ahead and introduce them first, and then they will come up in the order in which they are introduced. So we are going to begin with Mr. Keith Wilkey, who is the Director of Social Work and Homeless Liaison for Bulloch County Schools. Then we will hear from Nurse Jenny Maddi, who is a sexual assault nurse examiner with the Teal House. And then finally we will hear from Catherine Findley, who is the Solicitor-General for Bulloch County. So please welcome them in that order as they come to share different perspectives about what violence is happening in our communities and how we can help to address it. So first, Mr. Wilkey.
Good morning, everybody. Again, thank you so much for the warm introduction. I'm glad to be here today. And I made a little speech. I kind of prepared kind of what I wanted to say. And then afterwards, if you want to talk to me individually, I'll be glad to talk to you then, all right? Okay. Well, so we know about Uvalde, Marjorie Stoneman, Douglas High School, and Sandy Hook, among others, are now synonymous with a particularly insidious form of violence in our nation, which is the mass violence and school shootings. School shootings like these heighten the perception that schools are dangerous places for youth. Although no amount of school violence is ever acceptable, nationally available data collected by the U.S. Department of Ed and the U.S. Department of Justice on trends in violence and victimization reveals that the overall levels of violence in schools have declined from 1992 to 2017. However, how do we reconcile these trends with a pervasive sense that the number of school shootings is increasing and that the schools are becoming increasingly dangerous places? A 2019 review of the most widely used and well-known data sources revealed that incidences of multiple victim youth homicides in schools started declining in 1994, but had been increasing since 2009. Thus, the public's perception is that there is an increased likelihood of a school shooting grounded in an increase in multiple victim school-associated deaths. Despite this increase, however, the rates of violent victimization and serious violent victimization in schools are low and have been decreasing since 1990. So I'm saying that to say kind of this. We know about the major shootings and the major violent incidents that are going on nationally. Our attention nationally is focused on those things, but when we're looking at the numbers a little bit deeper, we're noticing a decline. Now, I'm not saying that problems don't exist. Please don't take that from what I'm saying. I'm not trying to minimize the problem at all, but there are problems that exist in the school, and I'm going to get to that in just a little bit. But I want to put it in a proper context is that we have serious problems here. Then we have the everyday problems that I want to talk about in Bulloch County and the Statesboro schools that we are addressing. Okay? So when I thought about securing Statesboro and school violence and moving beyond the numbers, I wanted to explore and share briefly with you some definitions and then jump straight into some evidence-based solutions that we are implementing in the Bulloch County School District to address the issue of school violence. Lastly, I'm going to conclude with three encouragements on what we can do as a community to address these problems. And again, I want to make it clear that while national data says that school violence has been on the decline, in no means am I saying that it does not exist. All right, we know that it exists, it's on a decline, but we're still going to address what it is. So let's talk about what school violence is and then kind of where it's located. School violence is violence that occurs in the school setting. It describes violent acts that disrupt learning and have a negative effect on students, schools, and the broader community. School is the location where the violence occurs. It's not a type of violence. School violence happens on the location of a school. And some of the examples are like bullying, fighting, punching, slapping, kicking, weapon use, gang violence, and sexual violence. Now, this violence can occur on school property, on the bus, which is on the way to school or from school, during a school-sponsored event, or on the way from a school-sponsored event. So we know that these issues exist in the community. It happens, and I'm sure almost everyone can kind of think back to a personal situation that you may have had with your family, or you've seen a viral video that's been going around with some school violence incident. The most common types of things that we're seeing, number one, would be the bullying issues and cyberbullying. And then number two, right after that, is going to be fist fights. Fighting, that's kind of like number one, number two, kind of coming up right together in Bulloch County. Now that you know the definitions, and I kind of told you what the top two issues are for school violence in Statesboro and Bulloch County, I want to tell you just a little bit about 4 strategies that we have implemented in Bulloch County Schools to address the issue. All right. So now, a cornerstone in making sure that schools are safe is, and I'm not talking about the metal detectors and locked doors and ID badges. Those are all important, and we do have those systems in place for our building security. I'm talking about the safety, the mental health safety of the schools and the students and the staff in the school. And there are 4 key preventative measures that I'm going to tell you about. First of all, what we're trying to do is promote a connected community within the school. Now, with the connected community, the research is telling us that when students feel more comfortable at school and they feel like they belong there, they're less likely to engage in aggressive behaviors at school. So, key activities like group decision making, teamwork building, and conflict resolution, often led by teachers, is what we're doing right now. Currently, we're piloting these class circles. Some of you may have heard about morning meetings in the Bulloch County school system. What these morning meetings are is when the teachers are sitting down with their groups of students and they're starting to have collaborative community building classes, just like a little 20-minute class. Sometimes it's not even that long, but we're sitting together, we're building our community within the classroom. It's being piloted and it's being tweaked right now. Once we kind of have it the way we want it, we're going to roll it out to more schools. So we're in the process of building these community things to address the school violence. So that's the first thing, is building a better school community, okay? The second thing is teaching social and emotional skills, and I'm going to call that SEL. So our social emotional skills, we're teaching students to identify their feelings, we're teaching them to calm themselves, and we're teaching them how to connect with others. One of the things that we find when we teach these social emotional skills is that students may have distress at school, but we're teaching them ways to cope with it. And we're teaching our staff how to identify these kids who are having these social emotional struggles and what can they do to kind of self-soothe themselves to get back into class. Some schools do have social emotional learning coordinators whose job it is to guide the school's overall effort into teaching SEL strategies. So we have that in some schools too. And again, this is another program that we are bringing in slowly. We want to make sure that we're doing the program correctly so that it can be duplicated throughout the whole district. Oftentimes what happens is we'll have like an idea for a good program and everybody wants to push it all out at once. And when you push it all out at once in a district this size of about 11,000 kids, it's going to be really hard to implement. So what we're wanting to do is make sure that we have it right the way that we want it, and that we have people trained the way that we want it, and then it can be duplicated across the district. Make sense? That you want to start small, you want to build it just right, then you want to duplicate it so that it can be easily reproduced, and it's still research-based. We're not losing any integrity in the program. And then 3 and 4 is early interventions and providing accessible mental health support. So oftentimes the school might be the only place that children can get mental health supports. So what we're doing, and what my department is really doing, is we're getting out into the community and we're trying to find mental health professionals to come into the school to provide individual and group counseling. The way it stands now is we have partnered with 7 local agencies here in Statesboro that are coming into the schools to provide mental health counseling for any student who wants it and any parent that consents to it. So we have to have the student consent and the parent consent. Once we have that, then we will set aside time for a licensed counselor to work with that child or work with a small group of children on their issues, and then hopefully we're helping them with strategies, with coping skills, with whatever they need so that they're mentally successful in the school, okay? Also wanted to add to it as well, we know that there's a substance abuse and drug problem in our community. Our newest addition to our team of counselors is we also have a substance abuse counselor that's available. So when students identify that they have a substance abuse issue, some of our older students, we also have a certified addictions counselor that will come into the schools and will help the students and work with the families on addressing addiction issues. So understand when we're trying to build these types of programs, it takes time. It takes time to build a program. It takes time to build a program right. So that's really what our focus is right now, is really slowly bringing along these programs so that they can be easily duplicated across the district. Out of everything that I told you right now, what we're really working the hardest on is providing those mental health services for the students in school, because we're seeing a lot of anxiety, we're seeing a lot of depression coming in, and then those 2 diagnoses can lead to a myriad of other issues. So we're trying to address those first. Also, on top of that, sometimes there are some students who need a little bit more than just individual counseling. They might need psychiatric services where they'll need medication prescribed. So we also have 2 agencies that have psychiatrists on staff that can meet with the students and the parents through telemedicine, and then they're able to get prescriptions online. So we are really trying to bring the mental health services into the schools so everybody can get the help that they need. Now, as I close, there are 3 things that I think we're doing already, and I want to commend us on, and I want to kind of encourage us to continue to do it, and now correct me if I'm wrong. The first thing that I want us to do is keep talking to the children and the parents, but especially the children, okay? Because the kids know what's going on, they know what they need, and they need to be partners as we're discussing the whole issues of what makes you feel safe at school. Let's bring in these children as co-contributors, if you will, okay? Asking them, what do you think about this? What are your opinions, and how can we assist, or what can we do to make things better as an adult? The next thing that I want everybody to do, and my second charge, is to really stay involved. You may not have children in school. You may or may not have children in school. If you do, definitely stay involved. If not, please think about getting involved, because one of the things that we got to get to, and I think we want to move to, is that you might be a fictive kin or an extended family to somebody who's struggling. And you're like an auntie or an uncle, a fictive auntie or uncle. Please, please, please stay involved with that child's education process. Be an advocate for them. Be an advocate for them. Stand up for them when you need to. Be a voice for them when you need to, because we need to hear that as well, okay? And then the last thing that when I thought about moving beyond the numbers is this council that we have, the whole violence prevention piece. Let's continue to grow this in whatever way we can, because it's going to be an integral part that we cannot continue to work in silos. It can't be the school system over here doing this thing, the police department over here doing this thing, the city's over here doing this thing. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. It hasn't worked. So what we need to do is continue to work together and have these courageous conversations. One of the things that I did talk about in our small group is I want to implement in this county called Children in Need of Services, because families don't need punitive punishments, they need help. And in order to get those folks the help, they need to know where the resources are. And if we identify a student that's having problems, and I'm going to just, like, for example, if they're having a problem, one of those old classified unruly problems, skipping school, not paying attention, not coming home when they're supposed to, those lower level, I'm putting in loose quotes, those lower level problems, why can't we pull that family in and wrap some supports around it? That's kind of where we want to head, but we can't do that by ourselves. The school district can't do it by itself. No one entity, no one agency can do it by itself. So as I close, we know that school violence exists, right? We know that there are steps in place to address it. But then the last thing we also know that we need to do is we can't give up, and we need to continue to work together. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Maddi. I am a sex assault nurse examiner at the Teal House, Statesboro Regional Sexual Assault Center, and Child Advocacy Center. Let me say this. I've been a registered nurse for 19 years. I've worked ICU, critical care, and ER. I work at East Georgia as well. I'm the risk manager there. And I did work in the ER for 2 years. And so I have seen from both walks of life what we have going on. At the hospital, we see a huge mental health aspect and part to violence and things that we're seeing there are problems with. At the Teal House, what we see are a lot of college students, a lot of, I went out drinking, and I said no, not being able to consent due to being intoxicated, saying the word no, and the other person being so intoxicated that they aren't hearing that you're saying no. And then the pediatric aspect. I've done pediatric and adult adolescent same work for 13 years, started in Louisiana, My husband was active duty military, and so we have moved all around, and everywhere that we've gone, I've done some form of SANE work. Here in Statesboro, we do see a fair amount of pediatric patients, which breaks my heart. But the main reason I'm there for sex assault to do this job is I'm trying to make the time that they're with us as calm and as non-judgmental, and as I want it to be that they don't remember their time with me, to be honest. We play music, we crack jokes, we try to do anything to make, whether it's an adult, whether it's a 60-year-old woman, whether it is a 2-year-old. I've had a 1-year-old here in Statesboro that's come through the Teal house. We're here to collect the forensic evidence for the police, to help them, and to take care of the patient. Some people call them victims. I don't call them victims at all. I try to only refer to them as my patients. I first and foremost am a nurse. I'm here to do a full head to toe assessment. The kids think it's so funny when I look at the top of their head and then at the bottoms of their feet. No, my feet are clean. Nope, we have to make sure your feet are clean. You know, you have to try to make it, I try to make it something they're not going to remember. They're going to remember their time with the police. They're going to remember seeing an officer, you know, good, bad, whatever. They're going to remember that. I try to make my portion of it non-memorable so that they don't have to remember that someone was there taking pictures of them, looking at parts of their body that normally you tell them nobody gets to look at. So I think that what I do see a lot of in Statesboro is people don't know that we exist as much. People don't realize that we have a child advocacy center. We do forensic interviews for the police. So if there's something that's going on and a child there's a question, the police will ask the Teal house to do forensic interviews where they actually have a forensic interviewer. One of our staff at the Teal house sits down in a special room. It's videotaped, and they talk to the child and try to see what the child will disclose. A lot of times kids don't disclose. That doesn't mean whether they say yes or no, that something happened doesn't necessarily mean that it's yes or no. It's not black and white. We believe the victims are patients when they come. I'm not trying to make it, like I said, as judgment-free zone as possible. That's about all I have. Because we're not doing numbers and this is beyond the numbers, I thought that if y'all had any questions that you wanted to ask me, I'm more than happy to answer or explain what we do at the Teal house in more detail if you had any questions. Yes, sir.
So from the beginning, who brings in the children?
So it can be, we get our patients in a lot of different ways. So a lot of times the police actually bring the person in and drop them off with us. We always have a nurse who is the same, and then we always have an advocate. We never do a case with someone without having an advocate. I'm the person who is collecting evidence and taking down the statement and doing a full head to toe assessment to make sure that that person or child doesn't need medical intervention. So the police are one way. The hospital, a lot of times, people present to the hospital, especially with kids after a long holiday weekend or summer. Your non-custodial parent will have a child, and when they get back to their custodial parent, we typically have people who show up at the ER and say that something has potentially happened. Police are always involved, whether it's the PD or it's the sheriff's department. And then the other way is people can just call the crisis line. If they call the crisis line and tell us something's happened, we contact the police and we'll have the police come. And so they can show up at the Teal house that way.
Ms. Maddi,
Yes.
you said cases, you also deal with pediatric cases that would be under the age of 16, or what's defined pediatric?
So the actual definition of a pediatric patient is 12 and under. But if a child has not, I have had children who have come in 13 and 14 who've never had a period, female patients, or children who haven't started the period and have never seen a GYN doctor. In that case, I would treat them as a pediatric and not as an adult adolescent child. So it just really depends on their physicality and what they've been exposed to and what's happened as to what governs our testing and what we do.
Thank you. So there's some differences in the exam and assessment you do.
Oh, yes,
for
ma'am.
pediatric.
So an adult, if a 60-year-old woman comes and states that something has happened to her, maybe she was sexually assaulted, we would do an actual vaginal speculum exam. We do not do that with children. So children do not get that same exam, and it's just dictated by their anatomy and what's going on.
Thank you.
Sure.
You have time for one more question,
Oh.
and then we're gonna have
Of course,
debriefing
of
Q&A
course.
afterwards, yeah.
Do anyone wants the last question? How is the Teal house broken up? I know you have the exam room where you're at.
Uh-huh.
Is it a counseling room? Is it a?
So yes, what we have is we are in an actual old house in town. There are three offices on the right-hand side. And on the left-hand side, we have a room where they do hold counseling and meetings in the community. We have a sitting room in the center that has couches to kind of make it a little nicer, so when somebody has to come, it doesn't feel as clinical. And then we have a adult exam room with a bed, our big colposcope and big camera. And we do adult adolescent exams in there. And we also have a child's room that is painted so that the kids have something nice to look at. We have stuffed animals, we give them a blanket. We try to make it as nice as we can, and so
Thank you.
you're so very welcome. Thank y'all so much for asking me to speak, and we're always here if anybody ever needs us, although we hope that doesn't happen. Good morning, everybody. My name is Catherine Findley, and it's my honor to serve here in Bulloch County as your Solicitor-General. I took office in January of 2021, and I think one of the primary things that I learned when I took that office is that nobody really knows what Solicitor-General means. So, and I had to educate myself on being able to give that response. Not every county in the state of Georgia has a Solicitor-General. Our county does. We're a fairly large county, fairly largely populated. And so what that means is that I represent the state of Georgia in the prosecution of misdemeanor offenses that occur within the jurisdiction of Bulloch County. I'm a one county office. I operate in the state courthouse, which when I'm giving people directions, that is the red and white courthouse in the middle of town with the clock towers. We lost one of our clocks earlier this year during a storm, so I tell them that too. We're almost a full clock. But so in my office, there are positions for 3 full-time attorneys, including myself. We also have a victim services department, as well as a legal secretary who works with us. And in my job, and I'm thankful for this, I do get to work in conjunction with a lot of these offices that are here and represented today with all of our law enforcement agencies. So that is something that I do enjoy doing. In the cases that I prosecute, so I am dealing solely with misdemeanor or traffic offenses, so you're talking about offenses that carry up to 12 months on a sentence. These are offenses that don't rise to the level of felony offenses, and we do deal with a pretty large volume in state court. But there are a lot of things that have been said this morning that I appreciate, and I'm gonna kind of piggyback on, because we do have situations in our court where we deal with a great many number of what are designated as family violence offenses. And so we have family violence batteries, we have family violence criminal trespass offenses, things like that. And when our office becomes involved in these cases is when there's been an arrest made, someone has been charged with an offense, and now we are dealing with what is the best way to handle this case. And in our small group discussions, we had a good discussion this morning about when I say family violence offenses, that doesn't mean that it only impacts the person who is charged, or it only impacts the person who is the alleged victim. It truly is a situation that impacts the family. And so a lot of times in state court, when we're dealing with misdemeanor offenses, there are times that we have individuals who have never had a previous criminal cycle before, have never been arrested. That doesn't mean that there may not have been acts of domestic violence within the home or an atmosphere of violence in the home, but individuals that this may be the first time this has been reported. And this is the first time that somebody's been charged in their lifetime. So we're cognizant of that, and we want to make sure that when we are addressing these cases, each one's individual, each one has its own sets of circumstances and factual basis that we need to look at. But when we're talking about children who are in the school system, we oftentimes deal with family violence offenses that involve the person who is charged, the person who is the alleged victim, and children who are in the home that are witnessing some of this stuff that is going on. So what is our response to that? And we've talked this morning about early intervention, what we're doing in the school system, what we're doing with the children to give that education, to give those resources, to make sure that there are outlets for this kind of stuff, because you don't know a lot of times what these children are bringing into school, because you don't know what they're dealing with at home. And then also trying to make sure that there is education resources and early intervention for the adults that are in the homes that may at some point end up being a party to a criminal proceeding. We hope that doesn't happen, but the reality of it is that it does. So once we get into the actual criminal prosecution of it, we're dealing with, okay, what is the best solution here? What are conditions that we can put into a sentence that we feel like is going to help address this? And Ms. Nikki is here this morning. She's one that we partner with a great deal at Nikki's Place to include family violence intervention programs, which are 6 months long and made a part of every family violence sentence recommendation that I make in my office. And that is so that there is a 6-month program that is going to be to educate not just the person who is charged with the offense, but to provide that family with the resources that they need to learn how to, what an appropriate response is to tension, to stress, to family problems that we know are going to inevitably come up in any household, what the appropriate response to that is, and in hopes that we are creating a situation where this is going to be a one-time only kind of thing, and that we are intervening early and hopefully helping to prevent repetition of offenses. So we build those in. We do deal with, we do have a victim services department, as I said, and I have a full-time victim advocate who, when we do have charges that come in, once the law enforcement agency has investigated, made that case, made that arrest or issued that citation, that we're starting at the beginning of this process by making initial victim contact, the person who is listed in the report as the victim of a family violence offense, that we're getting information to them early about what rights a victim has in the state of Georgia when you're dealing with a criminal prosecution. And that will include rights to notification, rights to be present in the courtroom, things like that are covered both under the Georgia Constitution as well as Georgia has adopted Marcy's Law, which was a model first put forth in California, but we've adopted that and codified that in our code section so that we have parameters which our office
has to adhere by and what we do adhere by when we have offenses where victims are concerned, and primarily violent offenses where victims are concerned. To make sure that we're putting that information in their hands early, so that they can know what to expect from us, what to expect from the process, and also to start that communication with them about what resources are available in this community. And we partner a lot of times with Safe Haven, not necessarily always somebody that needs shelter, but also people that may need to go ahead and start getting involved in counseling services. Or maybe there are people that have offenses that have resulted in medical bills, or we've had people that have had offenses that have resulted in them being displaced, or not being able to have contact with certain members of their family. So we want to communicate with them, we want to try to work through that and see what the law requires and then what the best solution is, and we partner with these various agencies in town to provide those resources and direct them to places that can do that. And also where we have situations where maybe there's a no contact order in place, but you have a family unit that desires to remain in contact with one another while the proceeding is going on. We'll talk with them and with Ms. Jallo's office a lot of times, try to coordinate where we can help them come back into contact with one another, but also put in conditions to go ahead and start that family violence program, to go ahead and start doing things in the early stages of the cases, so that we can focus on getting these families, hopefully, the resources that they need and eventually reunified if that is the goal. So we handle a great many cases in our office. I know that this is, like I said, beyond the numbers, but we do have a good many that come in. Our law enforcement in this county specifically does an amazing job, and I'm thankful to coordinate with them, and all of your community leaders too with these services do a great job. But if there's ever anybody that needs anything from me, I am at the red and white building with the clock tower. And that is where my office is, that is where my courtroom is, and that is where you can find me most of the time. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you need anything. And I appreciate y'all's attention and your time this morning.
Let's give all of our speakers a round of applause. Thank you all so much. And so now we're going to move into the final part of our time together today, which is going to be our larger group debriefing. So I'm going to go back to Mentimeter. I know y'all are like, oh, we got to actually use our phones for something else. But, I'm going to leave this question up about what would it take to get from our current Statesboro to a more secure one. So again, if you have ideas as we're talking, as we're debriefing, please by all means offer them. But the way that the final portion of this is going to go is we're going to start with some Q&A with our, if you have any additional questions for our speakers. Then we are going to actually talk about some of the notes that came from your small group discussions, because we want everyone to be able to hear what was going on in some of the other groups. And then we'll close out with just thinking about some additional solutions that we may want to put forward, or even things that we may want to do ourselves, because all of us have a stake in being able to prevent violence in our community. So we want to start with questions for our speakers. Does anyone have any additional questions for our three speakers? Yes.
I have a question for Mr. Wilkey. Is it Wilkey or Wilkey? Wilkey? Oh, you're right. Okay, sorry, y'all went way back. So you said for us to get involved. So for those of us who don't have children in the school system, I mean, what do you recommend that we do? I mean, what is our charge? Okay, let me help you out.
Okay.
Tell me something, okay, because we talked about this in our group. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a public defender. Tell me something that I could do, okay? One as a citizen, you know. I mean, what can I do?
Okay. I think what it is, one of the things that I would suggest everybody to do is like, when we have the issues of, well, I'm just gonna kind of count it into the terms of school violence, right?
Okay.
Whatever circle that you're in, be it like your work circle, be it a church circle, a community circle, keep the conversation going about, let's talk about what's happened, and then let's start reaching out to see exactly what's going on in the community and what is my role in how I can possibly help to address. There are lots of things that go on. We're always looking for mentors in schools. Mentoring is always a big one. We can't ever get enough of mentors. We're always looking for people to come into the schools, and especially our alternative schools, to speak with some of these young men and young women and talk about, some of the choices that they made and maybe what can we do to help them when they return back to their schools, that they won't make those same mistakes that got them into the alternative school in the first place. That's the two biggest things. I think what we really are looking for now, and if you don't have that child in school and would like to be an advocate for a child in school, would be to really mentor. And I really, really, really would suggest starting at our alternative school program.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
If someone is willing to do that, should they call the individual school or should they call you at Board of Ed, or how would one start?
In order to be a volunteer for Bulloch County Schools, it's a two-part process. You talk to the administrator at that school. Okay, then the administrator at the school is going to direct you to our volunteer program, and I'm in that volunteer program. So you fill out a little online application on what school that you would like to work with and what it is you want to do. Then you'll receive a call from my supervisor to kind of flesh out exactly what would your mentoring look like and how would we categorize you as like a level 1 volunteer. Level 1 volunteer, you're just kind of coming in every now and then, but level 3 volunteers, when you really want to work with that kid, then we'd ask you to help, and we'd ask you to have to do a criminal background check with us. Once that's cleared, and then you'd be back with that administrator, and then you will set up, he or she will set you up with the students that you are mentoring.
Janice and
I wanted to say, I'm the oldest person in here. I bet lots of money. And I win. And I've been a school principal. And as a school principal, I lived at my school, which was across the street from the Elks National Home. Anybody know what that is? The Elks National Home is a place where gentlemen who were in the Elks Club all over the country, all over the world, it's an international group, can go and live it's a retirement home for gentlemen who were Elks. So I decided that I wanted some volunteers. I had a primary school, and that meant I had kindergarten, first and second grade only. So you don't think those kids need much, huh? Right? Just lots of love and that sort of thing. They all need it. They all need it. They need you. They need interactions with a really good human being. And if you're here today and you're worrying about violence in the city, you're a good person. By definition, my definition. Anyway, I had a program that I developed there for the Elks to come over. And one man came over and all he did was help one child with his spelling. Because he had to learn to spell 5 words every week, 5 different words every week. So, and he was just, this particular child was struggling with that. So he did it. Mr. Aarons came every week and worked with that child on those 5 words, and he went from getting none of them right to getting all of them right by the time the end of the school year was. Had another man who came in and listened to children read every week. Just a couple of kids, and he'd go in and sit down in the classroom and read with them. Had another man who did an art project with the whole class. And you remember those string art where you wrap it around the nails and that sort of stuff? He did string art with those children, and he did the little models, 25 of them, please, for that whole class. Those were just some of the things that we did, and you don't hear me saying math, you don't hear me saying social studies, you don't hear me saying any of the subject areas really, except he went in and asked the teacher, who needs some help? Who needs some specific help? And they all just had a ball with it, and that they went home, the kids went home and told the parents about it. Parents said, oh, let's have Mr. Aaron's over for Thanksgiving dinner. And so Mr. Aaron's got to go home with the children and have Thanksgiving dinner. So that it was a situation where the whole community was gaining because of the interventions that the gentlemen were doing. They didn't live in that county. They didn't come from that county, and I'm sorry I'm being so long. But I just want you to understand that every person in this community can be a contributing member to the society simply by going in and listening to a child. And I would ask you, listen to the children. Don't talk at them. Listen to them. They'll tell you what they need. It may not be, Ms. Cawthorn, I need blah, blah, blah. It may be, I'm acting up because I need attention. It may be, I'm not doing my homework because I'm tired, because I don't get to go to bed early enough. All kinds of things can be solved by our listening to children. And that's all I'm gonna say, is listen.
Thank you, Ms. Janice, those are wonderful. Any additional questions for our speakers before we transition into the next part of our debriefing? All right. Well, we will, we've got their contact information, we've got your email addresses, and so we'll be glad to send that information out. If you do have questions, or if someone close to you has questions, later on, you will definitely be able to get in touch with them. So as we think about the experience that we've had today, we want to talk about the notes that came from our small groups, and then we'll close out with your final thoughts about what are our takeaways for today. So I just want to read out some of the notes that came from the groups. And so these are not exhaustive, but this will give us a sense of what the different groups talked about. So one thing that was said in groups was addressing the problem from the front end. Waiting until it is a problem is too late. Smaller class sizes and focus on literacy should lead to less crime. One of the quotes that came out of a group said, we cannot arrest our way out of social problems. Police officers aren't given the proper training for what is expected of them, but are blamed for bad outcomes. We need to set up resources to really address violence, and it's the responsibility of the entire community to prevent violence. Another group said law enforcement is not the only solution. We need to see that other forms of violence, not just physical, need to be addressed. Gun violence is a major issue. Collaboration is needed. Certain communities don't get the same attention as others, the police, social work, etc. We need more activities for young people. Nice segue into what's happening after this. We need community policing programs such as Cops and Jocks. I've not heard of that, so we may want to get a little more information about that. Early intervention in education in schools, so middle, high, and college. Get youth involved in community and outreach. Violence-related issues and concerns, mental health, cyber stalking, violence at high schools, the alleged violence, aftermath, and how the community responds. And work with other agencies to educate non-judgmental space for children. Then over here, some of the things that came up, group efforts to address situations of violence on a consistent basis. Insight from those directly affiliated with situations of violence to raise awareness of smaller issues that can become larger. More resources for parents and guardians to develop skills to address and acknowledge situations of violence. And what is being done in schools to prevent situations of violence. So this is just a snapshot of what was going on in your small groups. And so now I would like to pose this question to you. As we've had this experience today of talking with other community members, of hearing from our esteemed speakers, and kind of engaging with each other even on a one-on-one basis, what are some things that you gained today that maybe you hadn't thought about before? What are some things that you may be inspired to do or think that we as a community should do in order to continue our efforts to prevent violence? Does anyone have any thoughts or impressions, insights that you've gained as a result of this experience today? Yes.
Yes, I found that, we're all on the same page. So we need to, do something. There are lots of resources out there. I'm a grant writer, business owner, teacher right here at Bulloch County. And I see lots of services in Chatham County, of course, the larger cities, but Statesboro is lacking a lot of those, resources that are available. A lot of those resources that are available. So I think all the agencies that came together and the speakers, if we just collaborate and work together, we could get a lot of those resources done here or here.
I noted in the room that there were a lot of eyes that perked up when you said grant writer. So don't be surprised if folks are trying to seek you out after we're done. But you're right, we do have a number of resources that are present here in this room. And that's part of what we're trying to do as the Violence Prevention Task Force. We want to be a nexus point to bring those resources together so that we can have more coordinated responses. Speaking of which, as you're leaving today, we do have a one-page resource sheet that has a list of, and Suzanne is holding those up. And so feel free to take one on your way out, but it has a list of a number of different community resources, the ones that have been discussed by our speakers today, as well as some additional ones that our Violence Prevention Task Force has compiled. So please feel free to take those and share those. We also have it as a PDF, so we can email that out to you with the email that you provided on the sign-in. Thank you for that insight.
What's her name? Her name?
Pamela Quinny. Pamela Quinny, Quiney.
Thank you.
And
Go
I'm sorry
ahead.
if I may, I just went back to establishing my YouTube page. A lot of people come to me about grant writing, but I really don't have the time. I mean, grant writing is a lot. But what I wanna do is teach people how to do it. So if you go to my page on YouTube, Pro Grants and Proposals, that's my business, I'm gonna be teaching people how to do it. So.
Thank you for sharing your resources. Other things that you've heard today, insights that you've gained, action items that you may want to take up individually or as a community as we are going out from this space. Yes.
Oh, something was interesting in my group number 2. Me coming in, I'm always about the children, focus on the children, community, all that good stuff. But one of the ladies brought up that we need a safe space for parents or adults, because at the end of the day, the children are going to get influenced by the adults. Whether it's a stranger or whether it's the parents at home or the big brother. So, we can take our time with the kids and have a plan for them, but we can't forget about the plan for the adults too, because they have to, we have to stay on top of them as well. So to kind of balance out that influence and, keep it moving forward. So I thought that was good, bringing that up, the adult side of it.
Thank you for sharing that. So we need a holistic approach that, in order for us to be effective with the children, we also need to work with the adults and the parents. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, Renata.
Actually, that's what we talked about in our group. We're all on the same page, but also the parents. And I think, parents need to be healthy as well. I like, and maybe he can expand on it, a safe place for the parents, because I guess the question is, we like that the school is having the mental health, right? We know, and we talked about this in our group and probably that group, parents bring their own problems, or concerns, let's not say problems. But how do we address those? So if there's a parent, and the parent is struggling, And I'm not talking about financially, which could be true. And so, yeah, I mean, each one of us, you know, whether it's Mr. Wilkey, whether it's myself, whether it's Catherine, whether it's Nikki, you know, we have someone, but we know that the parent needs to be taken care of. So how do we do that? And maybe that's the safe place he was talking about.
Yeah, if I can, real quick, I will come back to you about like, what does that safe space look like?
Okay.
And then also, if others may have ideas, we can chime in as well.
Okay.
Oh, no, I wanted to bring it back to you first.
Oh, me?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
what would that mean? What would that safe space, or what could that safe space for parents look like?
Yeah, I think, you know, having a safe space, because we can't forget, the kids have the issue. They should be priority. Kids are always priority. But we can't forget that the people raising those kids came up under the same system and under the same influence of negativity and gang violence and school violence and all that stuff. So having a safe space for parents, maybe, you know, having an adult, you know, cafe to where one of the ladies in my group, they brought up, you know, not teaching parents how to parent, because you don't want to prescribe your parenting skills on parents, because, you know, they may not agree with it. But give them the tools and the resources to understand, okay, this is what's going on. This is how you can help, or this is how you can counteract with your kids or talk to your kids. Because everybody's different, you know. Some parents might be shy, some parents may not know how to talk, some parents might be, you know, too busy with work. So, all right, so you're a busy worker. How can you balance that out with your kids and talk to your kids? So I think, you know, having a safe space for parents to come and talk, chat, you know, give different ideas and, you know, what's going on in everybody's household, you know, not too specific, but in a way it can help everybody, because everyone can help everybody, you know, in different places. So I think that's the beginning of the safe space I think we discussed.
Thank you for offering clarity on that. Anybody else want to speak to that? Yes.
I was in that group and I was mentioning to them about my organization working to strengthen families. I work for Child Abuse Bulloch. And we want to help families do what I call their toolkit, the 5 protective factors that every family needs. You know, parental resilience, connection to in the community, understanding of child development. And I had mentioned, and he mentioned a cafe, that I've just been trained in parent cafes. And they will operate like what we did, breaking up into the groups, having conversation. Because we talked about, say if we started saying, you need to go to a parenting class, that's going to set up, you know, a problem, the defensiveness. But bringing them into parent cafes, maybe talking about certain things. And in addition to Child Abuse Bulloch, I'm a part of the local Family Connection Collaborative, the Bulloch County Commission on Human Services. And with that program, we have a grant, 21st Century grant, that works with children at Langston Chapel Elementary, Maddi Lively, and G.P. Bryant, and there's also a parent component. So those types of things, expanding on those, helping parents, like they're talking about, supporting them, because there are a lot of stressors. And it doesn't have to be financial. You know, we're dealing with the pandemic and kids couldn't go to school. How am I gonna go to work? You know, there are lots of factors for how do we strengthen those families to support them, and not only prevent child abuse, but prevent, you know, those children getting involved in, say, gangs or any type of the violence that's going on in the community.
Thank you these are all really good ideas, and thank you for sharing these. And we, again, are gonna be compiling these, and we can share these back out. Because there are a number of organizations that are represented here, and, you know, there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration. So thank you for offering some additional insight on that. Other insights that you gained, or things that you're considering as action items, or think that we as a community should consider as action items moving forward? Yes.
I know we talked in our group about focusing on mental health and making sure that people have access to that, making that more readily available and affordable as well will probably be a big thing, especially for college students. I know for college students at Georgia Southern, you can get free mental health care if you work 12 hours at school. If you go over 12 hours of school, you can get that for free. But for those who might not have access to that, it would also be great to have. Another thing we also talked about was maybe having more areas in Statesboro where kids could have much to do. I was saying this in the group, but if you go on Statesboro Twitter and you search long enough, you'll see like there's a lot of people saying there's nothing to do here. And that could also lead to people getting bored and finding other things to do for themselves. So perhaps having more places available, like a community center where like more games or something that they can do other than resorting to violence or just drugs or something like that, that might help as well.
So mental health resources being made available, as well as more activities being made available to help people have something to do with their time.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Janice.
You're a student at Georgia Southern.
Yes.
Go to an elementary school, find a child to mentor yourself right there with that child. Because you're close enough to their age that they'll listen to you. They won't listen to me, they won't listen to him, they'll listen. Because we're these old folks, we don't know. But they will listen to you and they look up to you. Go find a kid and listen to the kid. That's the most important thing.
And Janice, as we get ready to close, I appreciate you bringing up this point about role modeling, right? That people tend to look up to the person that is just ahead of them. So, middle schoolers look up to high schoolers look up to people who are early career professionals or in college. College students look up to the professionals that are actually out and being able to make some money, right? So that proximity can be very helpful in terms of role modeling. So we can continue this, and I do want to continue this, but I want to be mindful of time. But before I turn it over to the mayor for any closing remarks, I just want to once again, well, first off, I want to recognize our two of our city council members who are present. I want to recognize Councilwoman Sherry Barr and Councilwoman Paula Shavers. I want to give a shout out to, and the mayor's probably going to do this too, but I want to give a shout out to the city of Statesboro staff who are here, who have been amazing partners in this effort. So I want to give them a hand and recognize them. I have to give a huge shout out to the members of the Violence Prevention Task Force, without whom none of this would have been possible. So wave your hands again. Thank you all for all of your hard work. It takes a lot of work to put this together. And now I would like to turn it over to Mayor McCollar, who will come to kind of give his closing thoughts based on what we've experienced today, and kind of give us his vision for how we move forward, and also invite us to the next part of today.
Absolutely. Again, we want to thank everybody for coming out on a Saturday. We know it's a lot of football going on today, but you chose to be here today, so we definitely want to thank you for that. But with that being said, there's a theme that was happening in here today. Notice how we ended up talking about kids, right? That's one thing. The other thing that kept coming up was the fact that this is all of us, right? And so I think that those are the things that we really have to lean into. We have to lean into recognizing that a lot of our young people are getting involved with things that they should not be getting involved in. And that means that we have to do what? Get off the bench and get into the game and really start doing something to address young people within our community. And I think the first major step to that is that we have to address hard truths. I'm just going to share this. I'm just going to be transparent. When I was growing up, I was raised by my great-grandmother and my grandmother. And my grandmother dealt with alcohol. She fought alcoholism for 30 years. And I remember growing up going to the AA meetings with her. And one of the things that I remember about the AA meetings is that before anybody got up and said anything, the first thing they had to say was they had to say their name and they had to say, "I am an alcoholic." And that is a truth. You have to recognize the battle that you're facing. And the truth for our community is that we have not done a good job of building infrastructure to support our children. We have not done that. We just revitalized parks that should have been revitalized decades ago. That's the first thing. This is the only city that does not have a citywide mentoring program. Why not? Those are some of the things that's low-hanging fruit that we did not take advantage of. And when we were not there, guess what? We had gangs move into our community, And they took advantage of our children for the sake of criminal enterprise. Why? Why were they able to do that? Because we left that void. That's what we did. We have to recognize that that's what happened. And so the way we fix that is by saying you can no longer have access to our children. So that means we have to step back into that void. And one thing that we have to do when we talk about collaboration, it doesn't matter who idea it is. If it's good, support it. If it's something that's going to improve the condition of our young people, make our community safe, support it. You may not be able to be at every meeting. You may not be able to be a mentor. You may not be able to do all of the things that's associated, but at least support it. At least be able to say, we're going to do some things to make sure that this thing happens because our community needs it. The next thing, this is all of us. If you're just sitting back and talking about those people over there and what they are doing and how they should be ashamed of yourself, know that if you're not putting no skin in the game and you're not trying to make this community better, you're a part of the problem too. And you got to take ownership of that. This is all of our community. And I'm going to tell you, if we can get together on Friday nights and Saturday nights and root for football teams in this area, why we can't get together to support this kind of stuff? That's what we have to do. So with that being said, when you leave this space, don't let this be the last time you have this conversation or that you put any work in until the next time we come. Go home. Think about what you can do in this community. And I'm going to tell you right now, we're setting up at the Honey Bowen building. We are launching Village Builders. Village Builders is a comprehensive youth initiative within this community where we've targeted 5 areas inside of the city. And we're going directly into those areas to work on early childhood literacy, food scarcity, neighborhood improvement, mentorship. We are going to where they live. And at the beginning of next year, if you're still looking for a space to mentor, we're hoping by late January, February, we'll be able to launch our community-wide mentoring program for these young people. We are looking to put in the work. We want to do something special in the city of Statesboro because the city of Statesboro is a special place. But it's going to take all of us to get it done. So I encourage you, if you don't have anything else on your agenda today, come on over to the Honey Bowen building. Learn more about what's going on with Village Builders. And if you want to put some work in, you got the Violence Prevention Task Force, you have one Boro, and we have multiple commissions, multiple organizations that you can come in and be a part of. We want you at the table. And here's the other piece, and I'm going to close on this. When we came into office almost 5 years ago, one of the things that we said is that we wanted a shared governance. That's why we created the commissions. We got Suzanne, we have Stacy, we have Renata, a multitude of other people coming in, and their ideas are being heard because we created these commissions. And we want to hear them and their solutions about the difficult things that we're facing. That's what government is about. It's about us coming together and hearing the ideas of others. And that's what makes communities better. And since we've had this collaborative form of government, look at the progress that we've made in our community. Look at the things that we've been able to do. And we're doing these things not with one person or 2 people. We're doing it in a collaborative effort. And what we're saying is come join us at the table and let's put that work in. And I got to step out because I got to get to the next event. All right, y'all take care. All right.
Thank you, Mayor. And just a couple of things before we close. One, please do not forget to take one of the resource sheets on your way out. And again, we can also provide that digitally. Number 2, I've got a QR code here. This will take you to a short 2-question survey. Because again, we're trying to gather the information that is going to help us to make the case for the programming that we need here in the city of Statesboro. So feel free to scan that, or if you can't scan it, there's a tinyurl.com/BoroVPTF. Words, come on, Stacy. VPTF. And lastly, as the mayor just indicated, there is an opportunity for you to be involved. And the Violence Prevention Task Force is always looking for concerned and dedicated individuals who are willing to help contribute to making Statesboro a safer place. So if you are interested in joining the Violence Prevention Task Force, on the sign-in sheet, if you just want to put a star by your name so that we can contact you and let you know how you can get involved when our next meeting is going to be and get you to be a part of this body that is working to try to make Statesboro safer. So with that, again, thank you for your presence. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for your willingness to participate. And we look forward to having this conversation continue as we move forward to secure Statesboro. Thank you all very much and have a great afternoon.